Welcome to the Race MotoGP Podcast from a very special location after the British Grand Prix weekend.
Our medieval tavern, as you christened it earlier.
Ye old podcast, as it is now known. I am Megan White. This is Simon Patterson, as ever. And we've been at Silverstone for the weekend. So let's get straight into it. It was eventful. We've got plenty to cover.
It was eventful. It was surprisingly busy, actually. I thought for a brief period of time we were going to have either a wet race or a very, very boring race.
A Marquez.
A Marquez.
Race.
Not Mark, Alex. I thought Alex was going to clear off with it. And then it that happened for like half a corner.
It didn't last very long at all, no. But first, let's talk about Yamaha. Fabio Quartararo's weekend went from very good to slightly difficult to very good to very bad quite quickly. He set pole with a new lap record. It was a fantastic lap. Brilliant work from Fabio. Tricky sprint race, after which he kind of expected a tough Sunday. And he was very frank on Saturday that he thought it was going to be a difficult main race on Sunday, and it was widely established that Alex Marquez was going to be the favourite. However, come Sunday's race, Fabio gets out in front after a bit of a false start that we had for one lap or whatever it was. Yes. One lap red flag. We can get back into that.
We'll come to that
later.
Yeah.
Fabio was leading by 4 point something seconds.
He came in to do his media debrief afterwards, and he actually looked at me and went, "What was my lead?" Yeah. I was like, "Oh, buddy, I don't want to tell you that."
So he was leading by a substantial margin.
It was 5.5.
And then everyone's favourite ride height device ruined his race, and he had a problem, and it was engaged, and that was game over for Fabio. And he was, he pulled over and he sat next to the bike, and he just looked absolutely devastated. And he came back into pit lane and he looked more devastated. And then he came into the debrief and was
not devastated at all until he was, and then had a bit of a moment in the middle of it and shed tears. And
for context for readers who might have seen this on social media, Fabio came into his debrief, spoke for a little bit, and then somebody asked him, one of our lovely journalist colleagues, David, asked him, what was it? The hope? Was it the hope that really kind of got you? And that was it for Fabio. And he had a little bubble, bless him.
A bit of a game over moment.
And everyone patted him on the back, and he had a little round of applause, and he regrouped. And after that, he seemed really positive and kind of took the good bits of the day.
Yes.
But bless him. I've never seen a rider, so emotional.
I mean, we're going to come to eventual race winner later.
Yes.
Right? We're going to come to eventual race winner later. If Fabio Quartararo had won a MotoGP race at Silverstone, it would have been a really big deal. It would have been a really, really substantial moment for the sport, because he remains the second most popular rider in the championship after Marc Marquez. He's massively, massively followed across the world. He's had an absolutely awful few years. His manufacturers had an absolutely awful few years. They've been rebuilding. Everything's starting to look rosy, and it would have been incredible. It would have been just wild. And none of it happened because of ride height devices. Because of a useless, pointless piece of scrap metal engineering that has absolutely no relevance to a road bike, that has absolutely no need to be in a MotoGP bike except for the fact that everyone has one, is fundamentally dangerous because it caused the Alex Marquez crash that brought out the red flags initially. It almost caused an incident with Franco Morbidelli and Miguel Oliveira the day before. It destroyed Enea Bastianini's wrist because his broke. It damaged Alex Rins' wrist because his broke. It left Joan Mir with a broken hand last time out in Le Mans because it caused turn 1 pileup. They're useless. We just need to ban them. We just need to ban them. And I know we're banning them for 2027, and I don't care. We should ban them tomorrow. They should be just gone from the championship because they're absolutely pointless. They're useless. I hate it. I hate this useless piece of engineering because our engineers are allowed to write a roadbook, and it brings no benefit and just ruins races. I hate it.
If they'd been banned, obviously, yesterday, Fabio would have won.
Yes.
So, questions from our lovely Patreon members club. Neil Condi said 3 poles in a row for Yamaha. Is this genuine turn the corner performance or circumstances at play?
it's a turn in the corner, but it doesn't mean they're ready to start winning races every week, even though they're now ready to start scoring pole positions every week. I mean, I think where we're at now, we're kind of back to where Fabio was end of 21, his title winning season, where he was still really quick in one lap, and then Pecco was beating him in races.
Yes.
We're on the path back to there, and obviously the next stage after that is able to win races again, and that's where we're into fighting for championship stage. They've found the one lap ability that they were missing. They found a little bit more speed. They found the ability to go around corners again, to hold corner speed, that Yamaha trait. They're still at the problem where they don't have enough top speed to essentially maintain position in the straight. And we saw in the sprint race, he lost 2 positions in 2 straights in the first lap.
Yeah.
Because he was getting zapped by a Ducati.
Yeah.
And that's still missing, and Silverstone makes that look worse.
Yeah.
But we're back to the thing where now that they've got one lap speed again, they can qualify really well, they can get to the front of the races, and they can run their own lap speed. They can run those high corner speeds, and they can use it to break away from the Ducatis if they get a fortuitous start. And Fabio got lucky to build up the early lead because Pecco Bagnaia got through into second and was a bit slow. And both Mark and Alex Marquez were a bit unsure because they just crashed. And the combination of those two things was that they were able to get away from him. He was able to get away from them,
Yeah.
build up the lead, maintain the lead, run his own lines, and everything looked like it was going to be amazing.
Yeah, and one of the other Yamaha riders, I can't remember if it was Jack, it might have been Jack Miller, was saying that if you're running your own lines, if you can run your own lines on that Yamaha, fine.
Yeah.
It's once they're interrupted that they have the problems.
Yes.
And that was where Fabio found himself on Saturday, was if your lines are being interrupted, then you can't then have that momentum.
And we saw it with Jack on Sunday as well, because he was a really comfortable second, and then once he got past, he was 8th.
Yeah.
And he had to work back way through, but yeah.
And JD also asks, is Yamaha just very good in low grip / low temperature conditions? And why did not a single Ducati risk it on the soft front tyre for the race? We'll save the Ducati bit for the Ducati section.
There's 2 really different questions there.
Yeah.
The Yamaha is traditionally the Yamaha has struggled when there's high grip or high temperature.
Yeah.
That's been a real difficult for them, because the problem has all been the corner exit acceleration, and the tire just spun when it was hot.
Yeah.
So they've always been quite good when it's cold, even if the grip's not as, you know what I mean? They can manage cold. And I think this was another case of that. This is a case of, this is somewhere where it worked, but this is somewhere where it used to work, and then it stopped working anywhere because they had that acceleration issue everywhere, and now they've got it back again. So it's another sign for me that this is moving in the right direction. Looks not so bad.
Yeah.
It looks better. It doesn't look fixed, but it looks better.
It's heading more consistently in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely a positive to take from this weekend for Yamaha. And one of our other members, Paul, said, who do you think is more ahead in the recovery, Honda or Yamaha? It looks like both are on the road to recovery, or is this an illusion? Now, having spoken to the Honda riders this weekend, Johan Zarco's podium and the other Honda riders feel like quite distinct groups. So Johan Zarco finished second in Sunday's race. Brilliant result. He actually said in his debrief he felt like at one point he might be able to win, and he'd followed Bez. He'd stuck with Bez.
Yeah.
Bez had the pace. Johan was like latched onto the back of him. See you later. The other Honda riders, Joan Mir and Luca Marini in particular, and Joan Mir was the same yesterday as well. He did not have a good Saturday.
Yeah, he had a disaster on Saturday.
And they came today and they're still having these chatter problems. They're still having the same problems. It's just that Johan can ride around it. So who's more ahead in the recovery? Probably Yamaha.
Oh, see, I disagree.
Okay.
Yamaha are made to look very good by the fact that they have Fabio Quartararo.
Yes.
Who is second best rider in the grid after Marquez at the minute.
I would
by
agree.
Quite a margin.
Yeah.
So they're being made to look really good. And you can see that from the fact that all the other bikes, yes, Jack had a decent Sunday at Silverstone, but everyone else all weekend and all season, no one else has been close to sticking a Yamaha on pole.
No, that's
it's
very
all
true.
been Fabio. And that has been traditionally for quite some time he has been, even go back to 21, the season that he won the championship, and there was no other Yamaha near him.
Yes.
There was one point in today's race when someone asked when was the last time that there was two Yamahas in the podium. Because it looked for a while like Miller and Fabio might do it. And I checked. And the last time there was two Yamahas in the podium was Thailand 2019, when Fabio was still at Petronas and it was Maverick on the factory bike, right? So it's that long.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that to me is a sign that Fabio is very much holding the end up, right?
Yeah.
He's doing the heavy lifting for Yamaha at the minute. Honda, on the other hand, have got quite a few, they've got like 3 guys in the top 10 now on a semi-regular basis, which makes me think that their bike is better. The problem with their bike at the minute is like you said, is the chatter issue.
Yeah.
And the problem with the chatter issue is that when you're Joan Mir, who I think is probably the best Honda rider, even though it's Zarco who's at the sharp end right now, when you're Mir, he's so aggressive. He rides like Marquez. He's so aggressive, and that makes the chatter worse.
Yeah.
Marini is super smooth, but he's a little bit slower, and he doesn't get the same chatter. Zarco seems right now to be the guy that's doing the best job of like threading the needle.
Yeah.
Of between too aggressive and too smooth. He's on it and he's making it work. And when I say that I think Mir is more naturally talented, that is taking absolutely nothing away from the stunning job that Zarco is doing.
Yeah.
He's doing an incredible job. But I think he's found the sweet spot on the bike. I think based on their relative performances, if they can find a way to fix the chatter, which is weird because chatter is one of those things that sometimes you can just fix it overnight.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can just go away overnight if you bring a new chassis or a new swing arm or whatever. And they're working very hard on a new swing arm. Because we know that because Aleix Espargaro was back-to-back testing an aluminium swing arm and a carbon fiber one all the way through the weekend, to the extent where he ran one in the sprint, was running the other in the race to gather data and said that the carbon fiber one now, the new one, is better, kind of signed off on it on Sunday and said that's going into production now. It'll be interesting to see if that comes and makes any change. And I think, off the top of my head, I'm terrible at remembering stuff like this, but like we had the same thing in like 18 with like a carbon fiber Honda swing arm that was Mark was doing wonders on, and Cal Crutchlow couldn't get one, and Cal was miserable and he had chatter, and then it arrived and things got better. So there's potentially a solution to this, and all of this is a very long-winded way to say that if they fix the chatter, Mir's going to be really quick.
Yeah.
But I think Marini and Zarco are also going to stay fairly fast. And as a whole, Honda are going to have 3 quick riders rather than Yamaha, who have Fabio and everyone else.
Yeah. No, you do make a very good point there, actually. I might have to revisit my earlier assertion. It's a bit like Goldilocks riding style at the moment, where Zarco's got the correct temperature porridge and everyone else is burning their mouths.
Miss your Goldilocks.
Well, quite. I mean, I think the thing about the average position, actually, probably if you look at it for Honda, there were, as you said, times when Joan Mir and Luca Marini have both been relatively up there.
Yes.
You wouldn't know it from some of the way Joan Mir felt this weekend, but there is tangible progress. They're not finishing 15th, 17th and 18th, the 3 of them. So
exactly.
There has been tangible progress. On to cameras. Today's episode is sponsored by Insta360, a leader in 360-degree action camera technology and a partner of World Championship leader Marc Marquez. They recently launched their X5 camera, a new 360-degree camera which shoots in all directions at once in incredible 8K 30 frames per second resolution for epic motorcycling shots without even having to worry about where the camera's pointing. Just hit record, focus on your ride, and find the best angles in the edit with Insta360's mobile app. It's easy, smooth, and uses AI to help you create everything, from shots looking back at you and your friends to racing-style gyroscope action that captures the flow of your rides. See more of your handlebars with an immersive point of view, or shoot unique third-person shots of you, your bike, and your riding buddies. X5 is every camera you'll need in one, whether you're an everyday rider or a 6-time MotoGP champion like Marc Marquez. From morning commutes to night rides through the city and everything in between, X5's huge sensors, triple AI chip, and dedicated low-light shooting mode deliver unmatched detail and image quality around the clock. It's waterproof, reliable, and features Insta360's toughest ever lens and lens guards, both of which are completely replaceable, meaning you can be confident taking it off-road as well as on and ride any weather the road can throw at you. When combined with Insta360's extensive selection of accessories, you can mount your camera anywhere on your bike to get just the right shot. And with a built-in wind guard, noise-cancelling algorithms, and compatibility with common Bluetooth communication systems from Sena, Cardo, and others, your videos will have crisp, clear audio and the ability to record your own commentary as you ride. To bag a free replacement lens kit worth $29.99 with your Insta360 X5 purchase, head to the link in the description below and use the promo code THERACE, available for the first 30 purchases only. For more information, be sure to check out the link in the description box. On to Ducati. It was a tricky weekend for Ducati, which is not something we say very often.
It's the first one of those in a long time.
Yeah, it's giving me flashbacks to our 2015 Revisited podcast when you talk about a difficult weekend for Ducati. Alex Marquez beat Marc to the sprint win. Marc had said it was damage control. He needed to change things. Alex was quicker at turn 8 and those long right-hand corners. Since Marc's injury, he has found those a bit more difficult and Alex has got the edge there. Sunday was less straightforward. We've touched on this before, but let's get into it. Alex crashed at turn 1 because of
right height device.
Simon's favourite. And then Marc crashed. And then Aleix Espargaro and Frankie Morbidelli, besties, also crashed in a very unfortunate incident where Aleix tried to brake earlier to allow Frankie space and then crashed. And then his bike hit Frankie. And then they both, go and check out the clips on social, did not look like good friends afterwards.
And then the very calm Frankie made it even worse in his media session.
Yeah, those two have got history, and today was not
Frankie went off on a tangent about how Aleix had cost him the 2020 World Championship by taking him out at Misano, and I do not recall that at all. And I need to go back and watch that. That's something to revisit this week once we're done. But then just ended his debrief with the absolutely devastating, well, at least he's not here next weekend line that was just a brutal put down of Aleix's retirement. Yeah, they are not friends.
No.
But it brought out the red flags. And
it brought out the red flags, and then because fewer than 3 laps had been completed, there was a full restart, which meant that Alex Marquez, who with his bike had been in the gravel at the end, well, not quite in the gravel is the problem, at turn 1, he was able to scramble straight back, and Marc was able to hop onto his other bike. Alex hopped onto the bike of his that had not been damaged in the crash, and they took part in the restart. Now, this did not mean it was then still a Marquez 1-2 in whichever order it might have been, because they then did have a difficult day still. Now, Marc went on to finish 3rd, which if you're saying a difficult day is 3rd, I think Marc 2 years ago would be, over the moon with 3rd on a tough day. Pecco crashed out. Alex went on to finish, I think he was 5th, mid top 10. Simon, what happened there?
Yeah. I mean, Marc came into this weekend knowing it was going to be tough.
Yeah.
And he referenced the injury and being slower in right-hand corners, but he's just not very good at Silverstone. I mean, fundamentally, he hasn't won at Silverstone since 2014.
Yeah.
He's just not very, he's only won there once in MotoGP. He's just not very good at Silverstone. And that's fine. You're allowed to have 1 or 2 circuits you're not very good at whenever you go to other circuits and they're Sachsenring. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Yeah, quite.
And I think everyone kind of knew that, and everyone had kind of tipped that it would be Alex's weekend to shine. And then he went out in the sprint race and he just beat Marc. Like, he beat him. He was better than him in the sprint. Marc had no answer to him. It wasn't one of those ones where he was like cruising behind him and then couldn't put it together. He just had no answer to him. So fair play, like 100%. He fell off. Alex fell off in the sprint because of the damn right height device, the front device this time, which stuck. And then he was like trying to slam the brakes and make it come off, and then it did, and the bike fell over. He was really, really, like you alluded to, he was really, really critical about Silverstone safety afterwards. There's a return road at that corner, like a strip of asphalt through the gravel trap, and he went all the way through it and hit the wall. He said that if he had been carrying more corner speed, if it had not happened on the first lap and he'd not been coming off the line, he'd have been a lot faster and it could have been really, really bad. And, something that should throw a massive red flag to Silverstone and Dorna. He referenced the Carlos Tatai crash in a European Moto2 race at Portimao, where Carlos unfortunately broke his back and is in a wheelchair as a result of it. So that, on a complete left field, by the way, Carlos got his first podium in a kart today.
Oh, amazing.
So he's back racing go-karts to get his first podium in a kart,
news.
which is wonderful. Yeah. So that flashed up on my social media afterwards. So really, really, like, it could have been much worse. And I'm really glad Alex walked away from that one. And I hope that there's gravel there next year, because let's not do that again. Then both Mark fell off because he was pushing really hard and made a mistake and was uncomfortable and fell off.
And headbutted the
foam barriers because he did that Marquez thing where he holds onto the bike a bit too much.
And he said in the press conference that he could see them coming, and he just was like, "Oh, I've just got a..."
It's Ian O'Neill and the Seagull all over again, isn't it? So then Frankie and Alicia had their little lovers tiff, and we red flagged it, and
oil spillage.
Yeah, oil spillage from Franco's bike, and there was, because I saw the marshals clean up excessive, and fair play to the race safe marshals, the British marshals, because the red flag went out really quickly because they realised what had happened. Good work. Red flag, restart. They were allowed to restart. I have absolutely no problem with that. I know lots of people are really unhappy that they were able to restart because they'd crashed. But, I mean, my feeling is if Mark had crashed on the oil, it wouldn't have been his fault that he'd fallen off. So I don't mind him rejoining, because that's fine. So I don't have an issue with that. It's 3 laps. It's a complete wipe. He was able to restart. Job's good. And then I think him and Alex were both a bit rattled. They both had big crashes. Their start was both terrible. Yeah. In the second time out, Pecco got through on them into P2, and then that's what allowed Fabio to escape at that point. Yeah. And then then Pecco fell off, because an issue that a lot of people complained about, actually. All tires are equal, right? But they're not. They're kind of, but they're not. Some tires will be, as soon as you figure out what tire you're going to use for the race, be it front or rear, you take one of them and you make it your race tire and you guard it with your life. So it doesn't get put in the tire warmers, it doesn't get heated up, it's kept in its temperature controlled loveliness. It doesn't go through heat cycles because it's your race tire, and that's the one that needs to work. And what happened, Pecco and quite a few others, is that they had to use the race tire, and they had a spare, but that spare had maybe been in the tire warmers for a few hours longer. It had been heated up and cooled down and heated up again. It's not the perfect race tire. And lots of people had problems on the restart with the rear tire. And no one's had rear tire problems all weekend, except for the usual tire life stuff. And then because we're in a situation where Pecco's already struggling with tire life, it just compounded things. And then suddenly he was in a world of pain and just really weird crash. And immediately was just, you could see the frustration. It was almost as frustrated as Fabio afterwards. Yeah. He was so angry with himself.
It was proper head in hands, anger, just like, why me? And he said in his debrief that he feels like he's in limbo. Like, they're trying to find the problem to fix the problem, but they can't find the problem. Yeah. So then he's just having these issues, and he doesn't know what the issue is, why he's having it, how he can fix it. He's just stuck. And I think he said that he's calm about the situation because they're trying to work it out. But you're calm about the situation, but your teammate, your new for this year teammate, is leading the championship by quite a big margin now. So he might be calm about the situation now. How long that continues, if Mark goes back to his winning ways that he's been in prior to this weekend, winning every sprint race before this weekend, you do have to wonder at what point this becomes less calm and more frantic. Annie asked, were Mark and Pecco suffering from the same problems or different ones at Silverstone? And I mean, it's
kind of, Pecco's suffering from the same problem he's been suffering from all year, and Mark was just suffering because he doesn't really like Silverstone. I think that fundamentally that's what it comes down to. It's like one had their usual problem, and then the one had a new problem that's a very temporary blip and will go away again whenever we go to Oh, I don't know, where's next? Oh, Aragon. You know, the circuit with a corner named after him.
Well,
it's going to be all right there, isn't it? It's going to be fine.
Mark will probably be fine.
I think so.
Looking at other Ducati riders, Seppi has said, we're regularly discussing where Pecco is in reference to Mark, but should we not be thinking about where Pecco's performance is compared to Alex? It's not surprising that Mark is dominating. Shouldn't Pecco be a little embarrassed of how Alex is dominating compared to him? And also, Seppi asks, do we think Alex will fall off at some point and fall behind in the ranks, or do we think that he will remain a championship contender? Does Pecco stand a chance to be second? We'll break that down. Should we be discussing where Pecco's performance is compared to Alex? Yes. No? Maybe?
There's important context. There's important context. I love that Seppi's question started with y'all, because she is Texan. Like, Seppi was my roommate in Austin. I know she's still like, I love that it starts with y'all. The GP25 is not very good. And we've been sold a lie. This is what it comes down to, right? We've been sold a lie that the GP25 is exactly the same as the GP24. And someone came to me this weekend and asked me to find out the difference. And I've been doing some investigation. And they're not the same bike. There are more substantial differences than we thought. And they're ones that kind of fundamentally do affect how the bike works. And suddenly all of Pecco's struggles kind of make sense. We knew that the GP24, remember the whole thing about they homologated the GP24 engine for the GP25. It's not exactly the GP24 engine. From what I've been told, they've changed some engine internals, which means it moves at a different speed. It has a different inertia, which has slightly disrupted the balance of the bike. The other thing that I've been told is different is that the new 2025 ride-out device, ride-out devices again, yay,
Simon's favourite,
weighs a lot less and is in a slightly different place. So what they've done is, without meaning to, they've changed the balance of the bike. And Marc Marquez, who is the best rider in MotoGP right now by a long, long way, is doing the Marc Marquez thing of riding around the problems. Pecco, who is an absolute confidence rider, who needs to feel the bike, can't feel the bike, and is doing lots of crashing. And Alex Marquez, who is riding the GP24 as it was, and it remains the best bike ever built, is having a great fun. And Mark, you have to remember this, Mark has never rode a GP24. He rode a GP23 and then jumped to a GP25. In fact, the only person in the grid that has rode a GP24 and a GP25 is Pecco Bagnaia.
who is struggling.
All the other guys have either, who are on the other rider who's in a GP25 is Fabio Di Giannantonio, who jumped from a 23 to a 25.
Same as Mark.
Yeah. And then everyone else either jumped from a 23 to a 24, is a rookie, or has kept their GP24 from last year, Franco Morbidelli. So Pecco's in this weird position, and I think it's affecting him, where he doesn't understand the bike, because it should be the same as his bike, but it's not the same as his bike, and it doesn't do the things that his bike did, his wonderful, wonderful GP24 did. And he's frustrated, and that's why he's talking about having to change his riding style. That's why he's talking about having to do things differently. And it's fundamentally, it's why he's crashing, because it's not the same bike. So I think the context of that then changes everything else. It changes where he is relative to Alex. It changes, where he is relative to Mark, because we know that Mark is superhuman talented. And really, the thing that we should be commending Alex Marquez on is where he is relative to Franco Morbidelli, who is his closest comparison at this point.
Yeah.
Franco should be absolutely trouncing Alex Marquez. He's the guy that should be fighting for second in the championship. Because not only is he on a GP24, he's in a GP24 he rode all of last year. Whereas Alex is the one that has at least had to learn a new bike.
Yeah.
And is smashing it this year. So I think Pecco gets a little bit of margin because of the changes.
Yes.
None of that takes anything away from how great a job Alex is doing. And maybe it's Frankie that we should be looking at and saying like, oh, come on, mate, do a little better.
If it looks to our viewers like I am learning this at the same time as you, I am also computing all of this data at the same time as you. So if I look baffled and then not baffled, it's because I am also adding it up as we go along. We're learning together. It all makes sense. So Simon solved that one. Well done to Simon. Send that to Ducati and see what they think of it.
I still think that. I think that means actually, to answer the second part of Seppi's question too, that Alex can maintain this level.
Yeah.
Because either Alex is going to maintain this level and be super quick. I mean, right now, he's going to maintain this level, and worst case scenario is he's going to be like third.
Which is not...
Unless another manufacturer finds a lot. Pecco might solve it. We've seen Pecco change his riding style before. He did it in 21, where he had to learn something new and it made it work. And then by the end of the year, it did work and he was quick. But, in fact, we talked about that earlier because he almost beat Fabio in the second half of that year whenever he learned it.
Yeah.
But it's whether or not he can do that. It's how long that's going to take. And it's what Alex does in the meantime, how many points Alex builds up in the meantime, whether or not they're second and third. Because I still think it's between them at the sharp end. But, yeah.
So, coming on to Aprilia, who have been in the news for all sorts of reasons recently, we'll start with the most positive, which is that Marco Bezzecchi won the race. Well done to Marco.
We've done the peak the race podcast thing and not talked about the winner until like most of the way into the pack.
Well, firstly, well done Marco for winning the race. Secondly, Marco Bezzecchi is sporting a fantastic new for this weekend mullet. Go and check it out. That's the magic.
The mullet, the magic is the helmet. British race, bit of British punk classic, God Save the Bez, Sex Pistols themed helmet that is just glorious. And I said to him on Saturday, it was like no one cares that you finished fourth in the sprint. The helmet's amazing. And he was like, do you like it? Do you really like? Oh, I didn't know if people would love it. I was like, Bez, yeah. And the hair is pretty cool.
The hair is very cool.
He's gone full Aussie Bogan.
He had fantastic pace on Saturday, Marco. Fantastic.
It was incredible.
Charge.
He just
brilliant.
As Massimo Rivola said on Sunday night, if he would only stop screwing up the first laps like he does every weekend at the minute. But I spoke to Massimo Rivola after at the end of the day, and he said like no one had paced like Bez, like coming through the sprint. But he was doing it from P19. He was one position ahead of teammate test rider Lorenzo Savadori at the end of the first lap. So to come through to fourth is like, I don't know the last time we saw someone do something like that in a sprint. That's a big effort in 9 laps.
Yeah.
So the speed was there.
Yeah, so speed was there. Sunday comes. We have the issues we've already discussed. We have the Ducati issues. We have the Fabio Quartararo ride height device issue. We have Bez being super, super fast. And Bez wins.
Bez wins. Yeah. I mean, everyone admitted that Bez should have finished second, including his own team and himself. That second was on the cards because Fabio Quartararo was so quick and built up such an early lead, and Bez had work to do. And they admitted that there's still qualifying work to be done, that they can't just keep giving away positions with bad qualifying early on in the race. But the pace was phenomenal. And he just cruised through the pack. He made overtaking look very easy. And like, what a ride.
Yeah, fantastic stuff from Bez. This links in with the other things we've been hearing about Aprilia recently around the Jorge Martin contract saga. Kieran Sharkey, one of our lovely members, asked, has Bezzecchi just saved Aprilia in the Martin contract saga? So, bit of context if you're not fully up to date with everything. There was news from the Spanish edition of motorsport.com after the Le Mans weekend that Jorge Martin wanted to break his Aprilia contract. Jorge Martin is still out injured. We then had a statement from Aprilia on Thursday of the British Grand Prix weekend saying that the contract's the contract, so enjoy the next year and a half, essentially. And we still haven't had a proper statement from Jorge Martin. He posted on Instagram that we would hear his side of the story soon, and he was on a bike ride. He was back to training, which is really good news for his recovery. So the part of the issue around the Martin kind of situation has been to do with the performance clause, saying that if he wasn't, running in the top of the championship...
Something that we don't know.
Yeah,
the top something.
The top...
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, and we don't know if it was him or the bike.
Yes, well, this is the other question. There's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of things we don't know about it, yeah.
But the question is, has Bezzecchi's win saved Aprilia here? Has Bezzecchi's win given Aprilia something to use here?
Yes and no. And I say no because I don't think Aprilia want to use it that way. Mm-hmm. The vibe I've got at the weekend from spending a fair bit of time in Aprilia and talking to them and whatever is that they'd rather all of this hadn't have happened. This contract saga, this distraction, if you want. They'd rather it hadn't happened, but it did.
Yeah.
Right? So now you have to deal with the consequences of the fact that it did happen. They need to, I think at this point, find a way to kind of welcome Jorge Martin back into the ranks. Probably the most telling thing that we heard about Jorge Martin all weekend was what Aleix Espargaro said about him is like best friend and father figure on Thursday when he talked about essentially the depths of depression that he thinks that Martin has been in over the last few weeks and how that might have affected his mood.
Yeah.
But how that's affected and maybe even kind of suggested that it might have affected his decision making.
Yeah.
And led to this bit of an outburst.
Yeah. Shameless plug, if you want to read more about what Aleix said, we wrote a story on it, so head over to therace.com. You spoke to Massimo today.
Yes.
What did Massimo say about this?
He kind of backed up what I'd thought about, now that it's all done, Aprilia still want him to ride for him. He was adamant about that. Aprilia want him to stay for the rest of his contract. They signed him because they think they can win together and they still haven't won together and they want to win together. And I get the impression that this is not a win. When he said after the race, and Dorna lovely, kindly stuck it up on screen to make a bit of a point of it, that he had said that, this is a message to Jorge. This wasn't a message to Jorge that the bike can win. This was a message to Jorge. The bike's ready for you. Whenever you're ready to come back and start winning, you too can ride like Marco Bezzecchi and win on this. And everything is going to be calm and fine and lovely. And we're going to have a nice time together and we're going to win some things. So just when you're ready, come back and join us. And none of that stuff that happened, that was your manager. None of that was us. None of that was you and me. Come back into the camp and we'll all be happy together. And I think that's the vibe. I think it's let's forget all the bad stuff. Come back, we'll be fine. And I think that's why it was an important message. It wasn't the angry important message. It was the calm important message.
Yeah, absolutely. Angelina cheekily said, do we call it karma that an Aprilia wins the race after Martin dropped that bombshell?
Aprilia wouldn't. Because of everything I've just said. That's the thing. There's no part of Aprilia that's smug tonight.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, and I think the main takeaway is that Marco Bezzecchi had a fantastic weekend. The Aprilia has been strong at Silverstone before.
Yeah.
Aleix Espargaro won in 2020.
There's a bit of fortuitous time in here. Where they just happened to have a good weekend when they needed it because the circuit that they're good at fell at the right time in the calendar.
Yeah.
And Martin will know that this is the Silverstone effect as well. But it still doesn't change the fact that there's a bit of a feel-good factor about it for the team.
Yeah. I mean, Annie asked, what effects do you think the outcome of today's race will have on the rider market?
I think all of this Aprilia nonsense, all of this drama will have been for nothing in the long run anyway, because none of it's going to affect the rider market, because he's got a contract with Yamaha or with Aprilia.
Yeah.
And he's not actually going anywhere, even if he wants to. So I don't think that any of this is actually going to change the rider market.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds from very briefly dipping our toe in the KTM pond, which was not a pond of happiness and fun. Just very briefly on that, it doesn't sound like Pedro Acosta thinks he's going anywhere either, given there'd been suggestions that he might end up, looking at Honda or... he was not very happy, but he was not very happy and seemed to be not very happy and resigned to the fact that he's going to be not very happy for a while. He said he needs magic. He needs something from KTM, and it was the same across the board from all the KTM riders. Like Enea Bastianini was like, I felt like boxing a lot during today's race because he was having such a bad time.
Enea Bastianini kind of said something that they're not allowed to say this weekend, and admitted that that they'd been struggling to get some of the new parts he'd asked for because there's no money. And we now know that there's money again. KTM have signed this big rescue deal that means there's the 600 million euros of investment into the company. It's coming from Indian manufacturer Bajaj, who want to race motorbikes, who want to keep the race program going. So all of that is positive. And I think that hopefully now things will start to move again. We know that there's going to be 4 KTMs in the grid next year. There was a rumor briefly floating around out of nowhere that they were going to scrap half the bikes and just run 2 teams instead of Tech 3. And Tech 3 were going to become a Honda team. And our friend and occasional podcast guest, Marcus Zorvig, went to interview Pit Bayer for that, who came out with the absolutely classic Austrian line of absolute bullshit, which is a glorious way to say, no, we're definitely running 4 bikes next year.
It made for a great headline.
It did. So I think everything is all right. I think everything is moving in the right direction again. It just needs time now.
Yeah.
And Pedro made a fantastic announcement. Someone told him he had lots of time because he turned 21 today. And I know he's a child. And he said, age is one of those things. You have lots of time until you have no time. And made a random out of nowhere Freddie Spencer comparison where, Freddie Spencer came super young, won 2 titles, had a bit of bad luck and then disappeared from the sport. Yeah. And I don't think he was saying he was going to disappear from the sport. Because I think if he became a failed MotoGP rider at 23, he'd go race the Eleman TT. Yeah. But where I'm going tomorrow, have I told you that? I'm very excited. But I think he knows he has a bit of time. He has another year and a half to try and help KTM turn things around.
KTM have some of the wisest riders in the paddock that come out with just some of this stuff and you're like Pedro saying, oh, you're young until you're not. And he also said, someone asked him, are you going to have to be, patient and wait? And he said, I am not patient. And he just, it was like, no, we can see that, Pedro. Yeah. But I think, like you said, Simon, the money's hopefully going to be there. There's going to be a bit more progress. And once they can kind of get things back on track and make some steps, I think they just need to maybe isolate and identify what to do first and how to do it.
Or who to hire to fix it, which is what we've seen other manufacturers like Yamaha do to turn things around.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, for Pedro's sake, Enea's sake, both of those two seemed pretty despondent. Brad yesterday, really one lap, he was terrible. Yeah. And Maverick today made some kind of comments about progress, and so I think hopefully things can be on the up for KTM again soon. I think it's worth talking about while we're here. Silverstone attendance always comes up. There's no getting around talking about the British Grand Prix weekend without talking about Silverstone's attendance. This weekend, it was 99,328. That is the first sub 100K total in the last decade. We wanted to know what you guys thought. And we had some great responses to our questions about this. Edie Rian, who we met this weekend at our pre-race meetup this morning, which was very lovely to meet so many of our fantastic listeners. So thank you guys for coming along. Grew up within earshot of Donington and went to many Grand Prix there, which was a vastly superior venue, but a less good track. Silverstone is okay, just very big with limited viewing. Problem is the audience. There are too many folk hankering for the presence of Rossi, and when much of the audience are living in the past, it's going to be problematic. Matthew Bolton said, we've been going for the last few years as a family. I did prefer Donington, but Silverstone does a good job. The pricing's improved. There's not promotion. V. Baker said, we really enjoy our visits, but if people are always criticising that it's not Donington or it's got no atmosphere or it's got the wrong weekend or it's too expensive, they need to find a way to attract a new audience or it's just not going to happen. So there are several kind of factors this weekend that might have affected that number. The Isle of Man TT, as Simon mentioned, starting tomorrow, practice week kicks off tomorrow, is a massive event for bikers. You know, if you're really enthusiastic about motorcycle racing and you live in the UK, probably what you're doing tomorrow on your bank holiday Monday is going to Heysham and getting the ferry. If you're down here, that's a long old ride and it's expensive.
But it's expensive. It's money.
Yeah.
It's money. And we've already seen it's a failed experiment. Silverstone have already announced that the date's moving back to August next year.
Yeah.
Which, anyone could have told you that. And I still remember having the conversations last year. They announced the date of the race last year. And I immediately said, that clashes with TT. No one at MotoGP had thought about that. And that shows the fundamental root cause of the problem. The people who organise the race, both Dorna and Silverstone, are so disconnected from British bike fans that they just don't get it. And it's no surprise, it's no secret to me that the best attended Silverstone Grand Prix were the races that Silverstone didn't organise. Because there was 4 or 5 years where the race was actually promoted at Silverstone by the Circuit of Wales. And they were the best attended British Grand Prix because they got how it works.
We won't go down too much of a rabbit hole, but for some of our listeners who might not know, can you very briefly explain the Circuit of Wales?
No, let's not do that. Dorna gives a contract to run a MotoGP to a circuit that doesn't exist in Wales. And because the circuit doesn't exist, they run the race at Silverstone for a few years until they take lots of taxpayer money and then admit that the project can't succeed.
And it never happened.
No, there's still no Circuit of Wales.
There's no Circuit of Wales. The other thing, which maybe isn't such a big issue for a lot of like MotoGP fans necessarily, but maybe people who are fans of motorsport in a broader sense and would have been tempted to go to Silverstone. I know, for example, I have 2 friends who came for the first time last year but didn't come this year because the weekend that it was moved to is the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500 and the Coke 600. Now, the Monaco Grand Prix is the only one time-wise during the day that interferes with that. But if you've driven to Silverstone, which is, not very close to that many things.
To anywhere.
And you want to get home and watch the Indy 500, you're not getting home in time. And the Coke 600, again, it's later, but that really chock-a-block weekend did put people off. And from a commercial perspective, our lovely colleague Ollie, who was with us on the ground this weekend, said that speaking to one of the manufacturers in the fan village, they'd lost quite a lot of usual VIP guests to Monaco, which means that hospitality is quieter. So it's that kind of knock-on effect of, while a lot of pure MotoGP fans who might have attended might not necessarily be interested in F1, there is people who will have had to choose.
Yeah, of course there are.
The supplier perspective, tent suppliers forced to choose between the Isle of Man and MotoGP.
Well, I mean, the big saving grace of Silverstone last year was, from speaking to friends who were in attendance, was all the cool stuff that Monster did. Monster Energy did in the fan area. Because they were title sponsors last year, they did a ton of events with it. All of the stuff that they used to do that sort of cool fan experience is already in the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
They're title sponsors of the TT. It's their biggest event of the year.
Yeah. And hardcore fans as well. If you're a hardcore bike fan, the TT is such a, that's where you're going. Yeah. So,
I mean, there's also for me, there's questions to be asked of TNT Sports. I know that the coverage and the paywall is one thing, right? We can debate that another day. But like Canal Plus in Le Mans did a live broadcast on Thursday night from the start-finish straight with 25,000 French fans in the grandstand.
Wow.
They were live in pit lane. All of the riders came. Fabio unveiled his new livery for the weekend. Zarco did backflips. All sorts of cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
In the UK, TNT couldn't even show the sprint live. They showed it with an hour's delay.
Yeah.
How do you make that work?
The pay thing is obviously an issue. Like look back at,
you can't change the fact that when we were on BBC, 1.2 million people were watching a MotoGP race, and now 90,000 are watching it.
Yeah,
that's the numbers.
Going back to our 2015 revisited as well, like there was double the number of people on race day in 2015 than there were last year. At least I'm not sure what the number for today was.
Which also makes me like that. The fact that people used to come to Silverstone shows that it's not that people don't want to come to Silverstone, it's that they don't see value in coming to Silverstone right now.
Yeah, and I think there's, as you said, like the promotion as well is a really big issue.
It is.
If you go out your house and you walk down your local high street, there's probably somewhere a billboard for Sky Sports F1 with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and like, go and get Sky. Sky, which is expensive. It's a good product, but it's expensive. TNT, you see their billboards, and generally they're for football, which... If you're a bike fan, and all the bike racing is now on TNT.
Exactly.
Because
all
they
of
have
it.
superbikes.
Yeah. Both worlds and British.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be said.
And Speedway and motocross and all the rest.
So I think there's a lot to be said on that front as well. What can we do about it? Idarian has said, what is going to happen about the persistent low turnout at Silverstone? And Matthew said, apologies for negative question in advance, but it's sad to see a great motorsport show like that, especially a race like today, played out in front of empty grandstands. The vastness of Silverstone doesn't help, but the grandstands were empty and some really good vantage points. It's no doubt multiple things, but what's the main thing that needs to be improved to create more interest? They've got next year on the contract. What do they do?
If I had my way, if I could change one thing, it's that I'd have next year's race at Silverstone, but I wouldn't have Silverstone run the race. I'd have Motorsport Vision, who runs British Superbikes, come on and take over as promoter of the event. Because we see what MSV does at BSB races.
Yeah.
The massive, massive audience. There will be more people at a Bank Holiday British Superbike race this year than there were this weekend at the British Grand Prix. They had 55,000 people at Cadwell Park last year. We're going to see them deliver an amazing product. So bring them an MSV, have them run the event, have them market the event, have them do the meet and greets in the public with the riders in the weeks before. Remember whenever we used to do really cool PR events for MotoGP, like closing the Millennium Bridge outside the Tate Modern and have Marc Marquez ride a MotoGP bike across it. That brings MotoGP to London.
Did they do that?
Yeah.
I need to go and find some clips of this. Is before my time.
To London. You live in Glasgow, right?
Yeah.
Right. I remember doing a British Superbike pre-event for Knock Hill, where we closed George Square in Glasgow and just did motorbike riders do skids and wheelies.
Incredible.
Everyone in Glasgow knew that British Superbikes were at Knock Hill that weekend.
Yeah.
Bring bikes to people. MSV are really good at it. Let them. And let us use Silverstone, which is one of the greatest circuits on earth, as Sunday's race showed, to have a great race, but let someone who knows the British bike audience and who isn't more worried about selling out their F1 race in 6 weeks' time actually run the event.
That is a novel suggestion. And
One-step
I think,
solution.
Yeah, MSV, give it a go.
Yeah.
I think is the solution.
Exactly.
Longer term, obviously, there's the question, does it stay at Silverstone or does it go elsewhere?
Well, MSV now own Donington. And the contract with Silverstone expires at the end of next year. If this year and the lack of interest from everyone involved is anything to go by, Silverstone have no interest in keeping MotoGP beyond 26 anyway. And I'd be very surprised if it doesn't go to Donington, as long as they can make some of the safety improvements needed to be safe enough. But they benefit a little bit from the new rules in 27 that's designed to make the bike slower anyway.
Well, that's Simon's solution. We'll be interested to hear yours. If you guys want to share them with us, then feel free. That's for us for tonight, I think, Simon. Simon will be at the Isle of Man TT, and I'm sure you will get lots of very exciting content from that. And then it is back to MotoGP in Aragon in 2 weeks' time.
Yes, isn't it?
We will look forward to catching you then. Thank you for listening.